We are now well and truly through the looking glass. Trump has been elected as the next president of the US, and he is starting to make his pick of ministers, secretaries of state, etc. And of course, that is generating a lot of debate. So I'm not going to have a big, long, rambling intro. We're going to jump straight in and we're going to get the no delusion view on what is going on from a regular guest on the channel, David DeBatto. And we're putting this out at the same time as an interview with Joseph Lindsley. And these are sort of, to an extent, two different views on the current situation. I think it's important to have a debate. It's important to get out of our partisan corners and try to look at what's going on without necessarily just trying to beat up on the other side. Welcome to Silicon Curtain. Please make sure you are subscribed. There are some weird things going on in the algorithms post-election, which I'm sure you've read about, and I would hate for you to miss out on some of the great content and speakers that appear on the channel. Please thank you as well to everyone who supports David and supports myself by becoming a patron or buying us a coffee. It's incredibly important to keep this sort of work going at this time and allow us to continue to pour hours and effort into making this content. Thanks also to everyone who is supporting the fund for the filming of the documentary film To the Edge of Freedom. We're now almost there to start shooting the trailer and to start planning the first trip out to capture footage for what hopefully will be an award-winning film that we want to put forward in support of Ukraine to film festivals later next year. Without further ado, I'd like to welcome David DeBatto to the channel. He is host of No Delusion Zone podcast and is a retired US Army Counterintelligence Special Agent, geopolitical analyst, writer, and podcaster. David is also an Iraq War veteran and served as team leader of a tactical human intelligence team in operations within Iraq, and also is a former police officer. David, this is perhaps going to be a sobering discussion. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me back, Jonathan.
We've now had a couple of days to digest the initial impact of the result, and we're starting to see picks for secretaries of state. We're starting to see who will be in the inner circle of the president, who will be able to bend his ear and tip whatever they want into that ear, whether it is sensible policy or conspiracy theory. That, of course, is a territory of great debate at the moment. Have you been able to sort of distance yourself a little bit from the initial shock and starting to look at this sort of rationally and plan accordingly to the result?
Yes, good question. It's taken me a few days to actually regain my senses. It was quite devastating to me and millions of other Americans, and in fact, and people all around the world. And literally, I really didn't do anything for the first 2 or 3 days other than absorb the blow, digest what happened, try to reassess, and say, where do we go from here? And so now I'm back at it. And of course, I've been following all the news that's come out of Washington since then. And in the last, I think, 24 to 48 hours, the Trump transition team has announced some of his picks for his cabinet. And without really any surprise, he's picked some of the most loathsome creatures on the face of the earth for some of the most powerful positions on the face of the earth. For example, he picked Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General of the United States of America. Now, Matt Gaetz, for those who don't know, is a Republican congressman from Florida who has been under federal investigation for years for ethics violations involving allegations of trafficking underage girls and prostitution, among other crimes. One of his best friends, called his wingman, his associate, went to prison for related crimes to what is under investigation with Matt Gaetz. So this sterling individual now is going to be our Attorney General in charge of the Justice Department. One semi-bright spot, I guess, in this dark nightmare is Marco Rubio has been recently selected to be our new Secretary of State. Now, I'm not a great supporter of Marco Rubio. However, when looking at this three-ring circus, Rubio is probably the most qualified of any of them so far to hold a senior position, a position in the cabinet. So I can live with that if there's a choice. Another real sterling individual who's going to just, do America proud is Pete Hegseth, a military veteran and veteran combat soldier in Iraq and Afghanistan. I'll give him that. He's also a Fox News host, bootlicker and ass kisser of Donald Trump, extreme right winger. Absolutely no experience managing anything. So, of course, now he's going to manage a almost $1 trillion federal agency with many, many millions of employees, both active duty and civilians, the strongest military in the world. So that's Mr. Hegseth. We have also two other sterling, well, I can't leave off these two, Kash Patel and everyone's favorite person here, the Tesla CEO, is going to team up with Kash Patel and form a new agency with the acronym DOGE. DOGE is going to, we're talking, of course, about Elon Musk. Elon Musk and Kash Patel are going to oversee the, how did they call it? The streamlining of the federal government. They are literally going to be able be in charge of firing maybe hundreds of thousands of federal employees, recommending elimination of entire federal agencies, elimination or cuts of budgets, and anything else they think would be a good idea to form a MAGA government. So that's where we are right now. And it's only been, well, just a few days, a week since the election. So, stay tuned.
That's the defense secretary. Of course, I don't know whether this is a meme or whether it's true, but there is a claim here that he does not believe in germs because he cannot see them and has not washed his hands for 10 years. I don't know whether that's a made-up meme or a fact, but certainly if you look at someone like Tulsi Gabbard, she has gone on record repeated times to repeat Russian propaganda narratives such as biolabs in Ukraine, etc., etc. She is now being appointed to the position, I believe, in charge of national security.
Director of National Intelligence.
Director of National Intelligence. I mean, this is an extraordinary position. Well, we'll come on to national security because that looks like it might be an interesting and not all negative pick for the national security, the sort of Jake Sullivan replacement. But let's stick with Tulsi Gabbard. She's now in charge of Five Eyes, which some of the memes are already mocking it, saying that this is now Six Eyes because she is also acting on behalf of Russia. That at least is the accusation of her detractors.
Well, yeah, that's been out there for years. And of course, the crown prince of corruption, Donald Trump, as we all know, has been under active investigation by the FBI since I think he first came down the escalator almost 10 years ago of being colluding with Russia. And for those of you who don't know or can't read or just don't want to understand it, he was never exonerated by Robert Mueller in that investigation. Mueller just decided not to proceed with any criminal charges. He said he could not disprove it, and so he decided not to go forth with it, but he found plenty of evidence pointing towards corruption and collaboration with the Russian government, Russian agents, and the Trump administration, the Trump political apparatus. So, yeah, Tulsi Gabbard has been alleged to have been to be an agent for Russia, but she's not the only one. Look, what we're going to wind up with, and it's already started, is a series of Russian agents, people who have been very strongly influenced either philosophically and or financially by the Kremlin. And they're going to be in very senior positions within the U.S. government. And again, I won't use a bad word saying we're blanked, but we are doomed. I will say in terms of the short term, because this is right out of a dystopian nightmare. Hollywood couldn't write a script any darker or more outrageous. How about Robert Kennedy Jr. possibly being in charge of Health and Human Services or the one of our national federal health agencies, Mr. Anti-Vaccine, Mr. Slaughtering a bear and leaving it in Central Park, Robert Kennedy Jr., wacko. He's going to be in charge of our health policy, very possibly. I don't know how you dig out of this, Jonathan, in the short term. It's pretty scary.
And we were talking before we hit record that this is something that I have not seen explicitly said. I think Ukrainians will instinctively understand this because it aligns with their experience. But the Yanukovych regime in Russia, when it came back for the second time, again, there's a parallel here, was intent on essentially abolishing the democratic process. They really wanted to hang in forever and turn Ukraine into a puppet state, much like Belarus has become. And I think they fervently believed that that was possible. Maidan reversed it. It kicked out some of that influence. It didn't root it all out. It's taken the full-scale war to root more of it out. I wouldn't even say that it's all gone or that the Soviet mindset is completely gone in Ukraine, but it took a series of revolutions to root that out. But the whole point of Yanukovych's regime was not simply to control Ukraine to do Russia's bidding and to prevent it from joining international institutions and international security organizations. The intent was also to hollow out the army, to degrade the administration to the point where Ukraine becomes a basket case. It does not become viable as an independent state, and it becomes completely dependent on Russian largesse. That would be sort of loans, income, injections of funding, maybe even individuals to help keep the government going and the security services going. This form of state capture, we have a template for it, and we have a template for how it was partially beaten. That's why we're in a full-scale war, while Ukraine is in a full-scale war of its attempts to beat back the state capture. Is what we're seeing in Washington right now, the state capture or the beginnings of state capture of the US by the Kremlin?
It's a great question. And I'll say this. Years ago, again, when Trump was alleged to have been under the influence of the Kremlin for various and sundry reasons, and the investigation started, and then other investigations started into possible Russian influence within the government, within the Congress, within the Senate, within different departments within the United States. I took that as not so much conspiracy theories, but something that you couldn't just believe out of hand, that it was easy to try to believe, yes, Russia is, that Trump's a Manchurian candidate, and that all the people around him are under the thumb of the Kremlin. They're all apparatchiks. They're all taking money from Russia, and it's, as you say, a slow hollowing out and infiltration. That was years ago. Since then, with all of the actions that have happened, all of the facts that have happened, which I wouldn't have believed, I am now of the theory, the belief that, in fact, what you just said may very well be the blueprint, the template that is playing out here within America, because there's just so many things, so many facts, so many Russian talking points that are being spouted every day and have been for years by MAGA, and it's just increased. And the methods that are being used here that have never been used here before in the United States are tried and true Soviet and Russian methods for infiltrating and eventually controlling a foreign government. So I guess my long-winded answer is I can't prove it. No one can at this point, but I am more of the opinion today that it's Russia's fingerprints all over much of what has happened here, including Trump's first victory, certainly this one, and also the influence that Russia has posed with the American public through an incredible disinformation through social media. So I guess the answer is yes, it's more likely than not.
And where will the resistance come from? Because through the course of not just the election, but the last couple of years, I have the impression that there are two forces that do a far better job of trying to call Trump and his acolytes to account. One are dissident Republicans, something like the Lincoln Project. Others are the more radical Democrats, such as Bernie Sanders, who has a genuine populist base. Corporate mainstream Democrats seem to be terminally, I'm going to put it out here, weak and pathetic and incapable of mounting an adequate defense of their values and offense against this sort of, Republican tide, this MAGA tide that has swept the country. So where is the resistance going to come from?
Well, you made great points again, but you also left out the American mainstream media, which up until, well, not recently, but in the past at least, has been, if not neutral, has backed a liberal democracy, a government based on the rule of law. They totally abrogated their responsibility in this, and they did just an unconscionably cowardly job in giving Trump and MAGA the benefit of the doubt, even when they were inciting violence, talking crudely, just disgusting, talking about ripping up the Constitution, becoming a dictator, and on and on and on. So where is it going to come from, Jonathan? Since we can't depend on the American media, and I've just turned off mainstream media. I will not watch cable news anymore. The mainstream media, the TV channels, the main corporate networks, they're gone as far as I'm concerned. Where are we going to do this? Where's the opposition going to come from? And I consider myself part of the opposition, by the way. I am not a Democrat. I hate political parties, but I hate losing our democracy more. The opposition is going to come from, like you said, dissident Republicans, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and on and on and on, as well as some vocal Democrats. It's going to come on, if it comes at all, through social media, because that's where the Democrats fell down. They still don't know how to compete on social media. They gave the ground. They gave the entire media atmosphere, the whole milieu of social media to the Republicans, and that was huge. And we just talked about the Russians. They controlled a lot of that. There were some indictments not too long ago about fake sites that the Russians set up here in America that Americans believed were from Americans. They were all paid for by Russia. So the Democrats have to get serious about making, forming, and supporting social media platforms. I'm talking big money. They are going to have to get some corporate sponsorship, but they're going to have to get some heavy hitters in the Democratic Party, well-known people or new up-and-coming people who are going to have to confront the Republicans, call out their lies. I don't mean confront them as the way the Republicans do with crude adolescent language and taunts. No, be professional, but supply the facts, give people alternatives. Let them know what is out there, that there is an alternative. Let them know the Democrats actually do care about the working class, and tell them about how the Republicans are going to take away their health care and possibly their Social Security, and how they're going to outsource factories and other jobs even more than they have now. Tell them how bringing more drilling and fossil fuel production here in America is going to destroy what's left of our clean water and clean air, and how that's going to affect the quality of life for generations of Americans here of all demographics. They just need to get out there, get the word out on social media. Young people under 40, especially under 30, they don't watch TV. And they don't even watch mainstream internet or social media. They watch the movers and shakers on YouTube and on X and on all the other platforms. Not so much Facebook, but Twitter and not Twitter. The rest of them, TikTok. They've got to get out there. They're not doing that. That's my answer. They need to do a huge push, declare war against the lies of the Republicans on social media, and just hammer it at least until the midterm elections 2 years from now, if they hope to stand a chance at all of digging America out of this.
And it's extraordinary, isn't it? And when we're seeing a slightly more sort of sober and buttoned down version of that in the UK, where podcasts such as The News Agents and various other ones have popped up, and they're starting to become extremely popular. And what we notice here is that populists such as Nigel Farage will do well on these, because whether you believe him or not, whether you believe that what he's saying, whether he believes it himself, unfortunately, there's a certain authenticity there which strikes with the electorate, but it also inflames strong emotions. You either love him or hate him. It's the kind of Marmite factor, which is a UK reference, which is a strange yeast spread you put on bread. Either you like it or you hate it. It's you can't be indifferent to it. And of course, social media, the algorithms are built around that. Given the opportunity to appear on Joe Rogan, who perhaps is one of the more balanced, dare I say, of the right-wing media factory you're talking about, how much of a mistake was it then that Kamala Harris would run around, agree to travel to do interviews on mainstream media, legacy media, which had no impact on anything, but wasn't prepared to travel to be on Joe Rogan?
No, it was huge. I won't say that it lost her the election because, to be honest with you, having seen what I've seen now, I don't think that anything she could have done, or even if Jesus came down from heaven, it would have changed the election. The people that were going to vote for Trump were going to vote for Trump, but it did make a huge difference, and it might have made it a lot closer. And who knows? But yes, it was a huge mistake. She chose to, as you say, go on legacy media, mainstream media. She did the 60 Minutes interview. Young people don't watch 60 Minutes. And the people that watch 60 Minutes are going to vote for her anyway. I don't know who was running her campaign, but in that respect, they were stupid. This is insane. Here's the other thing, Jonathan. Yes, they need to, as I said, get out on social media. Just make new channels and get out there on all the main social media. But more than that, Jonathan, they need to be able to speak to the average American person. The thing that I think is obvious to anyone on either side of the aisle is that the Democrats are perceived as the snobs, the elites, the effete people who cannot relate to the average American and their problems. And you know what? They feed into that a lot. They talk about rights for trans. That's great, but you know what the percentage is of trans in America? It's so small, I don't even know it. About the trans or gender assignment issues of trans and genderless people being able to use either bathroom, trans athletes, and on and on and on. I'm not saying I'm against trans. No, of course not. But it's such an insignificant issue. And it was made such a big issue by the Republicans. In fact, I think it was the most watched ad during our Super Bowl that cost a lot of votes. I guarantee you, when they aired an old ad of Kamala Harris saying that she supports American taxpayers paying for sex change operations in federal prisons. It kind of an insane thing. She's gone back on that now, but the point is, Democrats can't talk to average Americans. That's a fact. They just can't. They try and they talk over their heads, or they talk about issues that the average person doesn't care about. The economy here is doing great. I think unemployment is down to 4%. Inflation is way down, past where lower than it was when Trump was here. Biden created more jobs and brought more factories here than Trump did and promised to do, but they didn't speak about that in a language that Americans could relate to and understand. They talked over them. So until they can talk and get candidates who can talk to average Americans and tell them about what they can and have done for average blue collar working Americans, and get on social media, just write off legacy media, mainstream media. It's done. And it's not going to help until they do those two things, Jonathan. They're going to continue to lose, and we're going to be in a downward spiral.
And this other point of not fighting back, I think, is significant as well, because again, before we hit record, we were talking about the failure to really live by one's values, the failure to really impose rule of law, the failure to reinforce US democracy, tackle gerrymandering, and really, there's been 4 years where it was, at least to us, it was absolutely clear from the day that Biden stood on the podium to do his acceptance speech it seemed to me, at least, he was living in the perception of a country that had already disappeared, something that disappeared decades ago, in fact. And to me, I think it was clear he wasn't going to do anything to really reinforce US democracy in a way that counted. Yes, certain stuff was done, certain electoral interference stuff was sort of tackled and talked about, but fundamentally, Trump wasn't held to account for his alleged illegal activities, nor were any of his acolytes. And there seemed to be no real attempt to tackle him, nor the growing problem of, say, money in politics, corporate interest, the rise of oligarchy, and the decline of institutions. Is that kind of fair that essentially the Democrats have handed the country on a platter to Trump?
No, it's very fair. It's very accurate. I've written and spoken about that for years since Biden came to office. Look, between the Democrats under Biden and the mainstream media, they have both conspired unwittingly to give the country to the Republicans and to Donald Trump. We spoke off air about one of my biggest villains, the person I have to admit I hate because he just lost us our democracy, and that's Attorney General Merrick Garland. Anybody that had eyes and a brain could see what happened on January 6th. It was broadcast all over the world. It cried out for an immediate investigation. And not only an immediate investigation, but it was obvious to anyone what had happened. Shortly thereafter came all of the testimony about what had Trump done or not done, what was his part in this, what had other high-ranking Republican officials done to instigate this or to not stop it or whatever their parts were. Instead of starting an investigation in the attempted overthrow of a fair election and possibly the overthrow of the United States government, starting this investigation the next day, 7 January 2021, Merrick Garland chose to wait over 2 years. 2 years before he even started an investigation. And then the investigation, well, we're still in it. Actually, it's stopped now. But what he did by pausing that investigation, and we can speculate on why, from Russian interference to cowardice to incompetence or all of the above. But the fact that he delayed that investigation for 2 years allowed Trump and his lawyers to delay, to postpone, and to essentially give him the opportunity to be nominated, to run, and to win this election and never pay a price for citing an insurrection to overthrow the United States government. Merrick Garland, remember that name. So between him and the Biden administration not taking the legal steps to try to prevent MAGA from doing what they're going to do, such as making sure that federal judges get appointed, especially on the Supreme Court, expanding the Supreme Court so that the Republicans don't control it. He didn't do any of that. You mentioned that. He didn't do anything. And here's the problem. The mainstream media and the Democrats were and probably still are under the assumption that this election was just like any other, a little different. Yeah, we have some, kind of a kooky guy there in Trump. He says some terrible things, and the Republicans are a pretty, crass, rude bunch. But other than that, it's business as usual, and we need to behave in a very laid back, professional, and calm way, as lawyers do, and most of them are lawyers. Well, that insane, cowardly attitude has now cost us our democracy.
And studying history is an interesting perspective, isn't it? Because if you describe to someone at the height of the Weimar Republic before the Wall Street crash what Nazism would look like, they'd be like, it's a different universe. You cannot imagine it until it happens. It's the same thing when you read the diaries, for instance, of aristocrats and whoever in the Tsarist Empire before its fall in 1913, 1914. It's inconceivable what just a couple of years later becomes normalcy, and the most unimaginable horrors become sort of everyday life. Before we sort of close out this episode, there is also a certain amount of normalization and pretending the room isn't on fire, to sort of use that sort of meme that goes around. This is, I think, still the attitude, unfortunately, of some Europeans. Yes, there are some who are now they're starting to hear the fire alarm going off, and they're thinking about, getting up from their desks and going out into the street or whatever. They may not have called the fire brigade yet. What do America's traditional allies, and especially those who do not want to see Ukraine fall to a tyrant, a kleptocratic, thuggish, psychopathic tyrant, what do European countries and other allies like Korea and Japan now need to do to ensure they are not left out in the cold as America slides into dysfunctional oligarchy?
They need to do what the Democratic Party in America and almost all of the leaders, except for the Baltic countries, I'll say that, in Europe also have not done. The leaders in Europe right now need to be honest with their people. They need to have an honest discussion, many honest discussions. They need to tell them that there is a fire in the room. In fact, there's a forest fire and it's out of control. We can't wait any longer. That after January 20th, we are truly going to be on our own. And that the danger from the East, the danger from Russia is not only real, it's imminent. And we are imminently unqualified to stop it right now. That if Russia were to pull all of its resources, even after Ukraine, into an attack on Eastern Europe, it wouldn't be a pretty picture. It would be pretty bad. So the answer is the leaders of all of the European countries, especially those in Western Europe who have been fat and sassy and happy all these years, need to have an honest discussion with their people and tell them that the defense budget right now, it's probably better than some of the other social budgets that they've been enjoying since the end of World War II, that they're not going to go away. But if they don't defend themselves, if they don't band together in their own collective security, there won't be any social security net. There won't be any benefits because they'll be back in the Soviet Union or worse, in a new Russian empire. They need to be that direct. Right now, they've been spineless for any number of reasons. Business connections in Russia that they don't want to give up, and just naivete, and in some cases, cowardice. They need to get over it now, because after January 20th, they're on their own. I don't care what they say, what the pundits say about how Trump's going to do this, that, and the other thing. It's going to be a whole other picture for Europe after January 20th. I hope it's not as bad as the worst possible situation could be, but it's going to be very, very different. And if Europe doesn't pull itself up by the bootstraps, if it doesn't radically reinstitute its defense budgets, retool its defense industry, switch over from a peacetime economy to a wartime economy, and I mean right now, it's going to be too late. So that discussion needs to happen right now, needs to happen often, maybe weekly or monthly, by the European leaders to their people. Otherwise, you're going to see what's happening here be a domino effect all across Europe. And in fact, as you know, it's already started. The right is winning, extreme right is winning elections in all over Western Europe. And if they don't get this under control, well, it's just going to get worse.
That was, if anything, more sobering than I had expected, but I think very welcome nonetheless to explore these incredibly difficult issues with someone with so much sort of passion and insight as you've got, David. This is not the last conversation I'm going to have on these topics. I look forward to regular conversations in what feels to be something of a crisis control room here, which is what the podcast is going to be turning into. I strongly recommend people also check out your No Delusion podcast. I think it's incredibly important. You have some great guests on there, and there are some fantastic insights uncovered by your conversations. But for today, David, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me again, Jonathan. Take care.